I remember noticing how calm my mother sounded, not soft, just settled, like she'd already had the conversation somewhere else, decided it, and was now repeating the conclusion out loud for formality. My father didn't look at me when she said it. He focused on his plate, cutting his food into smaller pieces than necessary. "Your sister's pregnant," she said. "She needs stability. We've decided her situation takes priority." I nodded before she finished, not because I agreed, but because I understood the shape of the moment. It wasn't an opening. It was a closing. "The college fund," she added, almost gently. "It will go to her now. You can work. It builds character." That part felt rehearsed. I said, "Okay," because there wasn't anything else that fit. No argument would change a decision that had already been emotionally finalized without me. And arguing would only make me smaller in their eyes, more difficult, less deserving. So I said, "Okay." I even stood up and hugged my mother. She seemed relieved by that. I could feel it in the way her shoulders loosened, like she had expected resistance and was grateful not to receive it. My father finally glanced at me then, briefly, with something that might have been approval. I went upstairs before the conversation could continue without me. The quiet in my room wasn't peaceful. It was precise. Everything felt outlined more clearly than it had an hour before. Not just what had happened, but what had always been happening. It wasn't sudden. That was the part that settled hardest. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the pattern assemble itself without interruption. Small things, deferred decisions, adjustments made in someone else's favor, my flexibility being treated like availability, my silence being interpreted as agreement. It wasn't anger, not yet, just alignment. My phone buzzed beside me. I picked it up without urgency, a bank alert. For a second, I didn't process the number. Then I read it again, slower this time. Not a withdrawal, not a transfer I didn't recognize, a confirmation. The account I had set up months ago, separate, quiet, gradual, had just completed its final internal shift. The timing wasn't coincidence. I had scheduled it that way back when I wasn't sure if I was overreacting. I had been waiting to see if I was. The alert didn't feel like victory. It felt like confirmation that I had read the situation correctly. 10 minutes later, someone downstairs screamed my name. It wasn't immediate chaos. It was sharper than that, confusion breaking through routine. A chair scraping, my mother's voice no longer composed, calling again, louder this time. I didn't rush. I stood up, walked to the door, and paused with my hand on the handle, not to build suspense, just to recognize that this was the moment where something shifted from internal to visible. When I went downstairs, both of them were standing near the dining table. My father was holding his phone like it had just told him something he didn't believe. My mother looked at me the way people do when they're trying to match two different versions of reality. "What did you do?" she asked. There wasn't accusation in it yet, just disorientation. I stepped into the room but didn't move closer. "I moved what was mine," I said. My father's expression tightened. "That account was in my name," I said, not raising my voice. "Always." He shook his head slightly, like that detail didn't align with his understanding of the situation. "We were managing that for you," he said. "I know," I replied. There was a brief silence. Not empty, just full of recalculation. My mother tried a different approach. Softer again, but strained now. "We made a decision as a family." I nodded once. "You made a decision. I adjusted mine." That seemed to land harder than anything else. No one escalated. It wasn't that kind of moment. The shift was quieter, but it held. Something procedural had happened, documented, finalized, outside of emotion. My father looked back at his phone, then at me. "This complicates things," he said. "I understand," I replied, and I did, just not in the way he meant. My sister wasn't there. She didn't hear any of it. Her situation was still real, still complicated. But it was no longer something that automatically rearranged me. My mother's voice dropped. "You should have talked to us." I considered that for a second. "I did," I said. "Just not tonight." That wasn't entirely fair, but it wasn't entirely untrue either. There had been moments, small ones, where I had tried to signal something. They just hadn't been recognized as important. Now they were. No one told me to sit back down. No one asked me to stay. The structure of the evening had already broken, and no one knew how to rebuild it. So I didn't try. I went back upstairs, slower this time, not to make a point, but because there was no urgency left. The outcome had already arrived. In my room, everything looked the same. But it didn't feel the same. I sat down again, not on the edge this time, but further back, more settled. There wasn't relief exactly, and not satisfaction. Just a kind of steady distance that hadn't been there before. Downstairs, voices continued, lower now, controlled again, but different. Not centered around me anymore. Not assuming my place in the same way, I didn't go back down, and no one called me again.